Day 59 is complete with 203 words. It is Tuesday, August 20, day 60 of my modified 90-day novel writing challenge. I'm munching on a cough drop right now. I'm making faces. I am feeling a little fatigued today, so I'm not all the way recovered, but slowly but surely I'm feeling much more improved. That's a plus. I drank 2 cups of green tea for that little caffeine boost. I think part of my exhaustion is from caffeine withdrawal, but I've yet to get to my writing session today because I'm feeling a little funky in my head. So I've been reading a little bit. I'm hoping with a little bit of downtime and some reading, I can get into my writing session with gusto. Today's tarot pull featuring Romantic Tarot by Lo Scarabeo. Some pizza for lunch. It is 1:50 p.m. and I am really happy with how my segment today is turning out. So I'm actually going to use that as a cue to stop and leave it off here. Previously, I would continue writing, but what I'm doing differently now is just ending on that high note and appreciating that so that when I come back to it tomorrow, I'm in a doubly happy state and that my mind isn't changed perhaps by a segment or a paragraph that I write that may not be quite as thrilling as the segment I'm leaving off on. I want to appreciate and savor the highlights in my process because that is not something I did really well in my first iteration of this challenge. I used my highs to then spur me into further bouts of productivity, and eventually that wore off, and what I was left with was fatigue and disappointment that where I left off was not as great as my high point, and that just made everything in comparison seem not as great. So I am reverse engineering this and stopping at a high point. For this session, I wrote 174 words.
What?
It is 11 p.m. I'm probably gonna be up a little bit late because I had a very robust nap earlier, but I wanted to film to share my new annotating system. My husband is playing Skyrim, so this is a perfect opportunity for me to pick up the camera and talk. We also did have a lovely dinner of frozen pizza, and that was great. So I'm feeling pretty energized. I have been thinking heavily about getting back into annotating. The reason being is because I really want to deepen my reading experiences and my connections with the books I'm reading. I want to enrich my reading experience further. But I had some serious hangups about annotating. Number one, I know that I will never be the person who can bring herself to mark up her books. I am that person who gets so squeamish about writing permanently in books. This squeamishness, however, is not just from the aesthetic standpoint. I just don't feel like there is enough room to write inside books to then keep the text clear that if I want to revisit it another time, that I won't get distracted by the cramming of my own thoughts in between the lines and margins. I also generally dislike writing in a cramped style. I used to love writing in the teeniest handwriting possible, but I am way past that now. And I go for more ease in my writing, especially because now I write with my left hand instead of my dominant right hand. I did make a video talking about how I taught myself to write with my left hand so I could access more of my right brain. And even though I would say I write pretty proficiently with my left hand now, it's still clunkier than my right hand. I don't have as much control. So writing in cramped spaces is a nightmare. I also don't want to write in my books because I believe that my thinking changes so much over the months, seasons, and years. And truthfully, I get bored reading some old things of mine that I feel are presently outdated. I don't like to have clutter, and I think that too many of my own thoughts collected counts as that. Most of my journals I actually throw away once I'm done with them. For me, it's an exercise in detachment, but it is also a discipline of training myself to convert my thoughts into working knowledge. Basically, what this means is that if I have a collection of my thoughts and ideas, I will give myself maybe about a month to do something with them, whether it's to create a project out of them, maybe a new manuscript or exploratory writing project, or even a DIY project, a video post or a blog post, maybe a note to a friend. I make it a point to use my ideas and thoughts, and if I don't use them, I delete them. I gained this idea inspired by Kaizen. It is a Japanese model of productivity and efficiency, and the premise is idea in, idea out. And if there's no productive way that I can output or express my idea, it goes in the bin. That said, I do a lot of cutting, and now I want to do more keeping, but intentional keeping. Keeping in the manner of adding salt, very little, and just the right amount. Another reason why I don't like to write in my books, most of my reading is from borrowed books at the library. And I rarely buy books because I only buy books that I absolutely love and know that I will reread and study again. So another reason why I do want to annotate is to help me in the curation of my book collection. But my second hang up with annotating has been that in past experiences, namely through school, annotation was an added mental burden, and it just became overwhelming, and it sucked the life and joy out of my reading experiences. I felt like I was constantly breaking in my reading to take notes, and in so doing, those frequent interruptions made reading a very distracting experience, and it made it difficult for me to wrap my mind around the big picture at large or the bigger themes. I felt like I was constantly reading out of context. It was too much mental work, and it made reading very ineffective for me. I do think, however, that in the right dose, annotating can be such a supplementary aid to the reading experience overall. And this is why I put a lot of thought behind how I could get back into it just at a much more moderate level. So for the main supplies, we have the book I want to annotate, a thin notebook, A5, pen, and a sticky tab set. Part of my new annotating system includes choosing one book that I want to focus on annotating. I don't want to annotate every single book I read, and if I do that, I feel like I will burn myself out. So I'm going to pick one book to focus on at a time. I think this will also make annotating special for me and something that I can look forward to rather than loathe. So, starting with this notebook, the first page I have numbered with a Roman numeral, and I am dedicating that, the front and back, to finished reads. Because it's a small notebook, I don't feel I'll need to allocate more pages for that tracking, so I won't have any wasted space with unused pages, and by the time I may need a blank page to keep track of all my finished reads, I will be starting another notebook. At least that's the theory so far. In this second full page, which is technically page 3, I have dedicated to my current reads. And this is actually going to serve as my index for the rest of this notebook. I've got the title of the work and then a status box. A check mark in that box will mean that I have finished it, and an X in that box will mean that I have DNF'd. Here, I will keep track of my handwritten logs of the quotes. And the index is super simple, just number 1 for number 1. So that's the notebook, which I also want to make into a hybrid scrapbook journal. Basically, when I am not feeling up to hand copy all the quotes that I have maybe tabbed, I'm going to type them up and then paste them into the journal. Along with the quotes, I may also write some notes on general impressions. Nothing too heavy, that's the key. Really, I just want a great way to collect my quotes in one place. I have found that keeping track of quotes in my phone has not worked out for me because I don't revisit them, they get really messy, and it's just not as aesthetic. And now for my tab system. So, in lieu of highlighting, I've decided to use a 2-tab system to indicate where I want to begin the copy of the quote or passage and where I want to end. So for this one, this whole passage is something that I want to collect. In here, I begin it here, and since it is a 2-tab system, I'll look for its second one, which is on the next page over here. Clearly, those are some big passages, so I will be typing those up, and that's why I also wanted to have a flexible journaling system that I could collect both typed and handwritten notes. The typed notes I'll print out and paste in as like a scrapbook moment, and having that option to type my notes removes a lot of the overwhelm that annotating can be. So here's another example of a large passage that I want to take note of, and then some separated areas. I also am using the translucent stickies to see through the text and act as a highlighter in a way. Where the colorway ends or begins, I use that as markers for where to start and stop my reference. In this way, I can get straight to the point of what I want to extract from a particular page. Here, I have a smaller segment that I want to capture. And so long as I use 2 stickies always to mark the beginning and end, I know that I can mark a page and I'll look for its corresponding second sticky on another line or the next page, if it's a longer passage that runs into the next page. Here is how I'm indicating the words I want to catalog. I have a vertical sticky aligned over the word that I want to highlight, and then I have a horizontal sticky right over the word. So eschews is the word that I want to catalog because it's not a word that I use often, and I want to bring it into my vocabulary, whether it be in conversation or in my manuscript. I am a sucker for words, if you couldn't already tell. And lastly, this colored orange sticky is just my bookmark. The idea is that once I've cataloged what I have tabbed, I will remove the tabs and reuse them. But also the idea is to catalog my tabs in a separate session from my reading. So once I've done enough reading, let's say I want to take a break from it, and I have accumulated a bunch of tabs, the idea is to then do my cataloging from that standpoint. This system will allow me to read without interruption and separate my reading session from my annotating. And in doing it that way, annotation won't be something that's a distraction in my reading, but that truly supplements and supports it. I made a little pocket in this journal so I can store the labels and the stickies. And keeping with the minimalist vibe, I just took a sticky and labeled this journal number 1. I ended up taping over this because the sticky was not sticking, but I think I like that better because it's more waterproof. I have organized my annotations, keeping this tab in place until the next day so I can keep track of how much I'm getting through in a day. Now for a quick little flip through. Got my annotations. I used a dictation feature to get all the quotes copied easily. It is 1:00 p.m. on Wednesday, August 21st, day 61 of my modified 90-day novel writing challenge. I should add that I ended up going to bed at 2 a.m. this morning, but now I'm going to sit for my writing session and I'll check back in a little bit. It is 2 o'clock. I have written 246 words for this session, and my week's total is at 1,032 words. This session definitely felt more like a flow session. The words came much more easily than they have been. I was starting to strain with the session, so I'm going to stop here, enjoy the high of writing in a flow, and I'm going to rest and read some more. I can hardly believe that I am almost at 7,000 words. This truly has felt like the most effortless 7,000 words I've ever written, even writing while sick. So if you're not a fast writer or a heavy volume writer and you're more on the intuitive side of things, there is hope for us to write a novel and get our projects done, though it might take a bit longer than it might for other people. I just love my new process so much more, and I have so much more lightness and well-being in it. Anyways, I think I'm gonna end this vlog here, and then definitely for my next upload I will be sharing my book haul because all of my books are finally here and I'm actually feeling well enough to film it.